Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Several weeks ago, we saw the first images of the James Webb Space Telescope. Very beautiful, right? I remember we watched those crystal clear, beautiful images of James Webb. We had a conversation, my wife's family was here, and my kids. We wondered, how is it possible you can see those images that are billions of years old, see them as they're coming to you? And watching all of those incredible colors, different parts of the galaxy, stars, and all those different sections of the universe that are so far, unimaginably far from us, but we can begin to think about and reach with our imagination. And I think that when we all started to see those images, we all took a deep breath from all that is upsetting in our nation, in our world, just to something else to see and to think and to imagine the breadth of our universe and how much life there may be in whatever form tucked away in those corners, but all of it together, one big universe. And in our world, all the questions right here of our times that keep coming to us. How are we just going to make it all work? Environmental crisis and taking care of people and their livelihoods and the climate and all the divisions, all the unique identities in our nation and world crashing together in so many forums. 2 decades ago, we were talking about a globalized world, that the whole world was starting to walk together in one direction. And now if we can have one nation that actually is walking in the same direction, we think that's an achievement. And how do you step away from a tug of war without losing what is precious to you? So in our parsha this morning, we ended the book of Numbers, 40 years in the desert. And it teaches us a little bit about this subject. And how did it all begin? It all began with that searching for unity, seeking unity. All the children of Israel, they set off on the journey together. They each had their own flag, but they walked together all around the ark. And when they gave donations to the tabernacle, each tribe gave the same donation. They all gave it together. And they traveled when the cloud went up, and we say Vayihi b'Tzorah in our services to remember that. And then they departed when again the cloud, all of it together. And yes, there were different numbers of people in each tribe, but they gave the same amount. They contributed as much as was possible per capita of each of the tribes. And then our parsha tells us of the 40 steps that they all went through together through the journey. Then they come to this moment at the end that we read about in our parsha this week. They're finally, after 40 years, at the very edges of the desert. And the Torah says the leaders of 2.5 of the tribes of Reuben and Gad and part of Manasseh, they suddenly approach Moses with a request, just as they're about to enter the land. They had a lot of cattle, and they've been grazing the cattle on the land just outside the promised land. And they said, these are good lands, good for our cattle. They say to Moses, well, this is the land that God conquered for us, and there's a land of cattle. We have cattle. Can we not stay here instead of entering the promised land? And Moses is in disbelief. Not enter the promised land? We've been marching for 40 years to enter the promised land. Are your brothers going to go to war while you stay here? Will you turn the minds of the other Israelites from crossing into the land that God has given them? And then Moses begins to give them a history lesson. Don't you know what this is all about? Remember why we spent the 40 years in the desert in the first place. He just cannot bear to see all of his vision and dreams end up in this way, with half the people stuck on the other side of the river. He just says to them, you're a brood of sinners, like your fathers. You're going to bring calamity on all of us. So then the leaders come up to him again, and they say, Vayigashu alav. And they approach them. This is the same word that's used when Joseph approaches his brothers at the end of the book of Genesis. They said, we do want to build our cities here, but we will send our troops in to help our brothers and sisters. But we will not return hope until everybody's taken possession of their land, everybody has what they need. So Moses takes a deep breath and he thinks about it and he answers. I'm reminded a little bit, my children, they've been watching Sesame Street. I can't remember if the old Sesame Street had this, but the new Sesame Street, what do you do when there's a problem that comes? It says, when you don't know in the problem, what do they do in Sesame? They say, I wonder what if, let's try. So Moses does, I wonder what if, let's try. And he suddenly says, well, okay, when you enter the land, if you come and help your brothers and you do it all the way, then it's okay. You can live on the other side of the Jordan River. And that's okay for me. The children and the flock and all those tribes will live separate on the other side of the Jordan. And how challenging it must have been for Moses to see everything he fought for 40 years not come to pass. They were not going to enter, but yet he accepted it, even though it was different than what he wished for. A kind of separation, but also not a separation. A solution that worked in that moment. In the end, what did he do? He tried to honor those 2.5 tribes and what they needed and what they wanted, what was their identity. So we don't know how our world's going to shake up with all the different parts, all the distinct identities and visions. But it may be that we'll have to accept some that are different than ours, at odds with our own. Maybe this story comes to teach us that what can bind us all together is a commitment, at least, for the overall whole, for the unity, for our brothers and sisters. And Moses looked heavenward and he wondered, is this really what's going to be? He decided to honor what the others wanted, as long as they remained committed to some degree to the whole. He judged their heart to be true. As painful as it was, he had to find a faith that it too was part of the plan and the unfolding of all life. I wonder what if, let's try. At times, we just have to let go of all of our preconceived notions and see what the world is going to bring to us. When we think of these days of Av and the destruction of the temples, one of the reasons the second temple was destroyed, as we learn, is that there were the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes and the Zealots, and they were all undermining each other. And everybody was fighting for their vision to be on top. In the end, it led to disaster. If only they'd been allowed each other, they each could have their vision and each could live in their own way and be at peace. It's very hard to see our nation, our world, Israel, fragment. And yet perhaps we can look into our hearts and wonder how we can honor the diversity in our world and all the choices that people make. And to see that may not be our vision of how the world should be, or could be, but perhaps it's an even fuller and more beautiful reflection of the beauty of the wide universe, unveiling ever more and ever more deeply the divine glory in all its forms. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.